Donald Trump has said it's over. Andy Burnham gave an online speech that the Labour Party acted too slow over Gaza.
Hezbollah is saying, we're not going to disarm. We're going to keep our weapons. If you're going to besiege an enemy, leave them one door open for them to be able to escape. We know you're allowing planes to take off from Saudi Arabia.
Rahm Emanuel, he went to Tel Aviv saying that America and Israel, now they need to separate.
Should the Qataris and the UAE have promised money to the Iranians? Chuck Schumer is refusing to reckon with it. Hakeem Jeffries is refusing to reckon with it. Cory Booker is refusing to reckon with it. This may be the last time and the last government that Israel is ever able to convince to do its bidding.
Are you happy, Sami? We're here in Istanbul at the Prophetic Strategy Summit, and alhamdulillah, we're overlooking the Marmara Sea. And alhamdulillah, we've got a show today with our regular guest, Sami Hamdi. Sami Hamdi, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to
Thank you for having me, Jalal.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for joining us. We're at this Prophetic Strategy Summit. What's your reflections on what you've witnessed so far? It's been a long few days, and I've noticed you've been up very late speaking to people at every corner of this conference. Mashallah, you seem to have lots of conversations with lots of people. I want to ask you about that, actually, why you do that. But give me your reflections on the conference.
I think the utility of the conference is that people from all over the Ummah who are involved in projects that engage the community and mobilize the community, they're all in one place. So it's almost like a 6-day crash course in getting the pulse on what's happening in these various different places in the Ummah. Whether it's, for example, in France, where they were fighting La Loi Yadan, for example, and which would try to equate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, and now there's apparently another attempt that is going to take place towards the end of the year, and they're just shifting anti-Semitism to anti-racism to make it more palatable for a French population that was deeply offended at the attempt by Zionists to transgress on their freedom of speech. You have, for example, like South Africans who come and discuss the xenophobia attacks that are taking place because President Ramaphosa is too fearful to go up against the Americans, who are heavily pressuring South Africa because they went to the ICJ case, and therefore they are threatening the free trade agreement, they're threatening the ECOA agreement, and therefore the president needs to find a different scapegoat for the economic issues instead of blaming the Zionists and the Americans who are putting that economic pressure on South Africa, instead of blaming the Muslim world that's too scared to support South Africa because they don't want to offend the Zionists and offend the Americans in that regard. The president has decided that I'll make immigrants the scapegoat, and then you have that xenophobic. The idea being at TPSS is, are there any narratives? Is there anything that we can do in order to push back against that hate towards something that is justice, towards something that is right? You have, for example, those who fly in from Malaysia and Indonesia who sit and they discuss that Malaysia is being racked by division. Now you no longer have just 4 or 5 Muslim parties, you have even more. That cohort that initially came together with a dream of creating a prosperous Malaysia, now they've divided. Mahathir, Anwar, Muhyiddin, and new ones emerging here and there. What is the future for Malaysia moving forward, given that those divisions means their economy is increasingly out of their hands, and therefore they may even lose their ability to be able to assert themselves as an independent state, as the caught between China and the Americas? What can be done in order to mobilize the community to pursue these cases? There are many people who have their rights violated, by which they are being imprisoned for things they should not be imprisoned, or they're being dragged through the courts in an attempt by the Zionists to scare them and scare the community into silence. Are there any other practices in other countries where lawyers have succeeded that we can benefit from their tactics, where they say, this is the legal point you should use, this is how we did it, this is how you can benefit as well? There are those who, in the world realm of AI, we are at the moment currently very behind. Why? The development of AI requires a freedom that quite simply does not exist at many parts of the Muslim world. And in the non-Muslim world, the pioneers of AI, we are technically nowhere to be seen amongst those who are pushing that AI. So people coming here and saying that in the midst of this environment, where we risk being on the back foot, where AI could one day be used to enable the drones to kill more kids in Gaza and the like, how can we develop some sort of education through which we're able to understand AI? How do we move beyond the traditional education, the likes of Walid Quddus, for example, who you interviewed over here? How do we move forward in order to engage? Do you have many people here showcasing how they are using AI? Even something as simple as video games. I remember when I was younger, some of my friends, I never played it, but so I was a FIFA guy, but many of my friends, they would play Call of Duty. And Call of Duty would be Westerners shooting up Russians or shooting up Afghans or shooting up. And there would seem to be no problem with this with regards to the law in Europe or indeed the law in America. When a game came out around the 2010s or maybe early 2000s, that flipped it, where it would be the Afghans and the Russians shooting the other side. The EU correctly banned the game because they understood that this wasn't just a game. This was the normalization of what the villain looks like subconsciously in somebody's eyes. And therefore you have the likes of Peter Gould who come here, who could take the book Tales of Khayal, who try to create an Assassin's Creed-esque game in order to try to normalize what a Muslim identity could look like for those who don't read the book. This is the point. This is why I always argue that amongst the conferences of the year, many of them are simply networking events. But here at TPSS, you feel like by the time you leave, you genuinely have a pulse on all that is happening. And that's why when you say, Sami, you're always there having conversations here and there, the implication in your statement is I'm the one doing the talking. I'm the one doing the listening. I'm the one who's going there in each and every one. And you find an idea that is maybe half-baked, but you say, this is the idea that can actually go forward. And alhamdulillah, I've been here for 5 of the 6 days. It's been tremendous in the sense of how much is going on and how much that we hope to contribute with whatever we have.
Now, before we move forward with the episode, I need to speak to you directly for a moment. Over the past while, a lot of you have been telling me the same thing. You're subscribed, you've got the notifications on, but our weekly program just isn't showing up in your feed. You're not imagining it. We've seen the numbers on our end too. Here's the reality. Because of the subjects we cover, the issues that matter to us, the issues that matter to you, we believe we're being shadow banned. The platform isn't banning us outright. It's just quietly making sure fewer of you see what we put out. No explanation, no notification, just less reach. We're not going to give up what we cover. That's not up for negotiation, but it does mean we need your help to make this content actually reach the people. So here's what I'm asking you to do, and it would take you 2 minutes to do this. Number 1, if you haven't already, hit subscribe and just as importantly, tap the bell icon. Notifications are the one thing the algorithm cannot fully bury. Number 2, join our WhatsApp group and Telegram channels. Links are in the show notes below. This way, when a new episode drops, you hear it from us directly, not from an algorithm deciding whether you deserve to know what comes out. Number 3, sign up to my Substack newsletter. Same reason. There is a list we own, not one a platform can quietly throttle. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, if something we put out resonates with you, forward it, send it to a group chat, send it to a friend, send it to your family. We're going to start putting out ready-made WhatsApp messages. You can just copy and forward. We'll make it as easy as possible for you. So none of this is about vanity metrics. It's about making sure that when a platform decides these conversations are less convenient for them, that decision doesn't get to be the final word. Remember, we come out with a regular episode every Friday at 6 p.m. UK time. Make sure you're the ones who actually see it. Jazakallah khair. So just to stick with that point, I do want to talk about Trump and a memorandum of understanding and American public opinion. But just to stick to the point you made there, I've noticed that you'd like talking to lots of different discrete people around the conference. You'd have little pockets of people all the time that you're speaking to. Like, what are you trying to achieve from these conversations that you're having?
My view on careers, life more generally, because one of the questions especially you get from the younger cohorts is, what advice do you have for me in my career moving forward? Is that I do think that everybody assumes a career is linear, and I'm not entirely sure where that seemed to come into our lives. We're given that when you read about Ibn Sina or Muhammad Jalal, they were polyglots. They were people who did so many things at once. They did medicine, they were philosophers, they did, algebra, they did algorithms. There wasn't necessarily a set career per se. They were famous for one thing while doing other things as well. Al-Biruni and Ulubeg and all these others as well. So part of me, when I read that part of history, I always ask myself, when did we switch from those polyglots who were experts in so many things to insisting we be an expert on one thing in the career moving forward? The reason why I start with this is because one of the reasons that I like to sit in these pockets and listen to what people are doing is so that I can get exposed to worlds I'm not normally exposed in. Somebody will say something that's so normal in their world, and I'm like, oh my God, is that really how... I sat with Peter Gould when we went and sat together. We sat together for 10 hours, literally just straight, forgetting even to eat, simply because he's in a completely different world, or what appears to be a completely different world. But somehow the more we spoke, the more we realized it's one world, but we just divided it between ourselves. And there's actually so much form in order to overlay and overlap over one another. Like I remember, for example, we mentioned a conversation and he was saying, Sami, some of the stories, they are what should be incorporated in video games. Now, I can understand that in the sense of, the reason I love the Chinese dramas and the Chinese history so much is there was a game I played as a 12-year-old called Dynasty Warriors. I bought the book it was based on, and that book turns out to be what the Chinese call one of their most formidable books. I understand the link.
Yeah.
The game Civilization is how I learned about West African kingdoms. They introduced Aski of the Songhai, they introduced Sundiata Keita, they introduced all these others that eventually when I would name drop them, they'd be like, how do you know West African kingdoms? I'm like, well, I won't lie to you, I learned it from a game. But in any case, when we were sitting together, I remember mentioning something about him that when you go to Cordoba, many Muslims feel like they can't really see the heritage of what Cordoba involved in. And I said to him, wallah, it'd be great if somebody had like glasses or like a phone where you could just, with the AI, just scroll like this and it would show you Al-Mansur with his army marching out of Cordoba, and it would show you all of these other scholars in front of their homes, and the AI, it would give you like a sense into their life, For example, I know Ra'ad here, Al-Juni has something similar. The point being is you see where the overlap lies, which makes me ask the question, is it that we are truly divided in the sense that we all should follow our careers, we should all strive in our careers, we should all be experts in our careers? Or is it that we are so disconnected from each other's worlds that we are unable to become like that which Ibn Sina was, like that what Al-Biruni was? And that's why when you sit with these pockets, it's not that I feel I can contribute to them. It's tell me what your world looks like. Tell me what, like I see a tree over here and I see a sea. What are you seeing? He'll tell you, I see that the waves are smaller. The other one will tell you, I see that the tide is not in. The other one will tell you, I see that it's shallow here and it's deep over there because you can tell the color. The other one tells you, I see that it's a bit murky on that side because everyone is noticing something else in the beginning. You put those all together, you have a complete picture of the sea, but you can't get it on your own. And that's how the ummah works. That's how you reconnect the ummah. In that everybody is telling you what the ummah looks like from your perspective. The Turkish delegation asks and says, why do you guys not set up here or do something here? And I respond and say to them, because when we are living in the Western world, for example, that while there are pros and cons to being in the Muslim world, when in the Western world, there are pros that we value even more in terms of our ability to say things that perhaps you would get offended too quickly about. These things, when it allows you then to ask yourself a question when you lay at night. Allahumma, where do I fit in this? Allahumma, why am I outside of this? Allahumma, am I outside of this because my heart is not ready enough to serve and therefore you have denied me the opportunity to serve? And if that is the case, Allahumma, it's similar to the Prophet ﷺ said in Taif. Allahumma, illam yakun ghadabun alayya. If you are not angry with me, fala ubali. Allahumma, please don't be angry with me. Allahumma, if I'm excluded from these worlds because you're angry from me, then Allahumma, I make tawbah to you now. I make istighfar now. Because wallahi, ya Rabbi, that guy's world is cool. That project that person is doing is cool. What that person is doing, there must be something I can contribute to it. And you know what breaks my heart, Jalal, and I'll finish on this point, is that when people present their projects or they say, Sami, this is what my world looks like, and I'd love your take on it. I tell them, wallahi, in this I'm a jahil. I'm worried if I say something, I will ruin your project for you. I love that people think I can be part of it, and coming to these conferences makes me really consider and rethink. I was on this trajectory, maybe I should adjust it accordingly. And the word I often use at TPSS, can I experiment? I may not succeed in it, but can I experiment so I can learn on that process? Even if I fail, I learn something about how your world operates, and that will later benefit me. It benefited me very much when we were, saying that Harris should lose. It benefited me very much when I thought Labour should lose the council elections. Maybe it will benefit me moving forward as we try to stop reform in the UK.
Jazakallah khair. Let's talk about the topic of today, Iran. The memorandum of understanding that was signed in Islamabad has effectively come to an end, it seems to me. I mean, Donald Trump has said it's over. There's been a tit for tat, strikes between the two countries. The Americans have hit targets in Iran. The Iranians have hit American assets, principally in Bahrain and Kuwait and in Jordan and some other places. There seems now to be a breakdown of those negotiations. What lay behind this? And I suppose my question is, what does Iran hope to achieve? And what does Trump hope to achieve? Because it seemed from our previous conversation that Trump was desperate to have some form of end to this crisis. He's got midterms coming up. He recognized the failure of the Israeli approach, which was to regime change. He recognized that there was a failure, and so he wanted a way out. That seems to be in reverse at the moment. How do you understand this?
There is a military saying in Chinese warfare that if you're going to besiege an enemy, leave them one door open for them to be able to escape so that they don't end up lashing out and fighting like a trapped animal. Iran has two key points of leverage in this negotiation with Donald Trump that are strangling the Americans. The first is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, in that the ships are stuck, ships are struggling to go through. That's affecting the oil price, it's affecting gas prices, it's affecting the flow of fertilizers for the US agriculture. It's resulting in a discontent that was already rife in the US with midterm elections coming up. Donald Trump believes that as long as Iran controls the Hormuz Strait, he's under time pressure to come to a deal in order to focus on those midterm elections. And the only way he can get to a deal is by giving and ceding terms that the world will say represent an American defeat and a historic transformation in terms of the regional dynamics, and America will never recover again. Trump believes that's trapped. The second leverage is Lebanon. Iran is demonstrating that Lebanon has to be part of it, and it's squeezing the Americans and the Israelis on Lebanon, insisting that America is not allowed to have room to cede to the Israelis in these negotiations. What I mean is, America was saying, I can appease Israel and Iran, meaning I can give Iran their deal and I can give Israel Lebanon, and this way, the Israelis who are happy I didn't go to war with Iran will be appeased with Lebanon, and the Iranians who are unhappy that I went to war will be appeased with the deal where I lift the sanctions and I unfreeze the billions of dollars. Iran is saying, no, I'm not going to let you hold the stick from the middle. I want to go even further because I know it was Israel that brought you into this war in the first place. I'm not allowing you to give anything to the Israelis, including Lebanon. And when Trump initially said, okay, fine, Lebanon is going to be included, and then Israel said no, and he said it's excluded. Iran fired missiles at Tel Aviv to essentially say there will be no deal unless Lebanon is included. So Trump is squeezed because if he doesn't appease the Israelis with something, as you've seen with US media, they just turned on Donald Trump. They've mobilized against Donald Trump, and there's always this rumor that Epstein files always appear whenever Trump and the Israelis clash with one another. Trump wants a deal, but not in these circumstances. Trump wants a deal in which he gets breathing space. Trump wants a deal in which I'm not time-bound by the midterm elections. I have another 2 years. And therefore, he's trying to weaken one of the two leverages. First, he's going after the Hormuz Strait, by which he says, okay, Iran thinks he can squeeze me. I'll go on the Omani side, and I will create a route where ships can go through. And that way, Iran won't have that greater leverage. The oil prices will come down, gas prices will come down, shipping will continue again. And that means I can breathe. The economic impact of that Hormuz Strait will no longer be brought to bear on the American people. And therefore, I'm not under pressure domestically to come to a deal. I can focus on the midterm elections. When he created that route, I'm not saying he did it with the Omanis. The Omanis are sort of, trying to balance between the two. The Iranians, when they saw the ships start to take that route, they sent drones and hit the ships. They said, we don't care what the Americans promised you. We don't care the route they made. You go through the route that we made. Now, this is a humiliation for the Americans. Like, imagine telling ships that you can go through and America is going to protect you. And then the moment you go through, the Iranians with these cheap drones, they send drones, they hit you, which means you have to turn. It's humiliating for Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is now attacking the Iranians, telling them, I need this route open in the Hormuz Strait, and the Iranians are saying absolutely no. In Lebanon, Trump tried something else. Trump went to the Lebanese government, him and the Israelis, and some Gulf states, and said to them, listen, we don't like the way Iran is using Lebanon as a leverage. We agree with Trump's approach, which is to give something to Iran and something to the Israelis. Don't let the Iranians negotiate on your behalf. You come out and negotiate on your behalf. And here's the framework agreement. Go and sign it and declare yourselves you're independent from Iran, and you will negotiate as a result. And we know you dislike Hezbollah just as much as the Americans and Israelis do. And the Lebanese government went, yes, we do. So then they said, okay, make it depend. Put Hezbollah in a catch-22. If they care about Lebanon, they'll disarm and respect the government of Lebanon. And if they don't care about Lebanon, then they'll continue the war and they'll reject you. The Lebanese government sees a golden opportunity to finally retake control of the south and get Hezbollah to disarm. So they signed an agreement by which they said Israel will withdraw when Hezbollah disarms. The Lebanese government say, hey, this is our golden chance to send the army into southern Lebanon and take it back from Hezbollah, who've ruled it almost autonomously for the last 15, 20 years. The Lebanese government signed this framework agreement, a huge win for Donald Trump. Because imagine if the Iranians are telling the world, we are the defenders of Lebanon, and the Lebanese people, not the Israelis now, before Israel was saying Lebanon shouldn't have a role. Now Lebanese people are coming out and saying, Yani sho hayde, what is this? Like we want to be represented on our own. We reject Tehran representing us. It's a huge PR hit for the Iranians who claim themselves to be the defenders of the Ummah, the defenders of Gaza, etc. and the like. And now Hezbollah is saying, we're not going to disarm. We're going to keep our weapons, making the clash between Hezbollah and Lebanon. My point is, it's Trump trying to weaken the two leverages. The reason Iran cannot give up the two leverages is that if it doesn't control the Hormuz Strait, there's no incentive for Donald Trump to give him the money. If Iran gives up Lebanon, then Hadi al-Amiri in Iraq, Nouri al-Maliki in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, the remnants of their supporters in Syria will turn around and say Iran can't protect us, Iran is not looking after allies. It will break the entire proxy system that Iran has set up that enables Iran to squeeze all of the regional neighbors like Saudi, like Saudi Arabia, like UAE, like Qatar. For Iran, this is existential. These two leverages are existential. They're not a choice. And Iran believes that it's not squeezing Trump entirely. They're trying to say to Trump, I could have closed the Bab al-Mandab with the Houthis. I'm not. That's my Chinese strategy of leaving you the way open. And Trump is saying, you're strangling me too hard. I can't negotiate with you like this. I want a deal, but not like this. And I think the final dynamic worth mentioning here is this. This isn't just about Trump. Trump is not the only one who is desperate to weaken Iran's leverage. The Gulf states, all of them, including the Gulf states without exception, let's say, with the exception of Oman, maybe because Oman has good ties with both. The Gulf states, without exception, are terrified and panicking over global order where the Americans, or regional order where the Americans allow Iran to be so strong. Where they want the Iranians to lose one of the two leverages. Some Gulf states prefer them to lose Lebanon because their immediate threat are the proxies. Iraq militias to the north, Houthis to the south. Some of the Hormuz Strait because their entire economy is dependent on LNG or dependent on the like. The reason why I say this is, it's easy to frame the question as Trump versus Iran. But when you look at the bombing of the Sana'a airport and the Houthis hitting the Saudis, it's clear this isn't just Trump and Israel. This is, as I said in the first podcast we did when the war erupted, my greatest fear is not Trump or the Iranians. My greatest fear is that the Gulf states join an alliance and a coalition against the Iranians, and this goes from being Israel's war to a regional war where we will all pay the price.
The reason we're here ultimately is to get permanent water, permanent sewer, and also create a fund so that we protect the residents from property tax increases and from being displaced because they can't afford a water bill.
We're here in Sand Branch, Texas. Sand Branch, Texas, right here in the heart of Texas. In the heart of Texas where they don't have any drinking water. And that's what we're here to do today, to make sure that everybody gets, well, they get life water. And that's why we're here. Thank you for joining us.
What we really need that running water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would help us out a lot.
The idea is to make sure they have municipal running water and municipal sewer. While we're planning a long-term solution, we meet residents and we see needs. And so today, we decided to do a Sand Branch Day of Service. We gave out water to everyone, which is what everyone needs every week. Thank you so much, and I appreciate everyone being out here, and we appreciate everything that's been done. We love you, and have a great day.
Please visit btml.us/thinkingmuslim to donate now. Let me understand at the moment, where the balance lies. Like, who has the upper hand in this sort of balance between the Americans and the Iranians? I get everything that you've said, and I get the leverage points that you've mentioned. I mean, historically, we've argued that, and I think you've argued that America does not think particularly strategically, and it hasn't thought strategically about this conflict, and that's why it got into this quagmire through effectively following Israel's intelligence, and that was a particular failure. But from what you've said there actually is some sort of joined up thinking in the way the Americans are now viewing how to deal with Iran, right? From your perspective, and until now, we've argued that the Iranians have really had the upper hand. They've been really calling the shots to a degree, to a greater degree in this conflict with America, and the Americans have always been on the back foot. From what you've described thus far, where do you see the balanced line? Is it with the Iranians at the moment? Are they ahead, or are the Americans?
It depends how you're measuring success in this war. If you're measuring it PR-wise, then Iran clearly has the upper hand in the sense that American military power is seen as significantly diminished, and Iran, with the help of the Qataris, is now pushing this narrative that it is, this sort of grand defender that's able to stand. And if you're talking tangibly, economically, militarily, Iran has been able to defend, but hasn't really been able to cause significant damage to the US military bases that are in the region. They're still being used for American flights to take off. I don't think that Iran has managed to put any military base out of action. It may have damaged one here and there, but the planes are still taking off from those bases.
Yeah.
So it's not like the American military bases are being diminished. If we're talking economically, Iran has been able to resist and stand in the midst of the Israeli-American onslaught. But the funds haven't been unfrozen. The sanctions haven't been lifted. It's true that the Gulf states, the Qataris, the UAE, potentially the Saudis, I'm not sure if the Saudis have paid any money, but it's true the Qataris and the UAE have promised money to the Iranians in exchange for being removed from the list of targets that the Iranians fire. And you'll notice Iranians in recent days, they fire at Kuwait and Bahrain. Qatar and UAE are now excluded to some degree, or they were excluded to some degree from the Iranian target hits. If you're sitting in Tehran and you're seeing the damage that Iran is taking place, do you see yourself as having won when you've reached a bottleneck where Trump is still digging his heels in and refusing to give you the sanctions, lifting of the sanctions? And if you cede on any leverage, he probably won't give you a lifting of the sanctions. Like, Trump isn't trustworthy in that he'll abide by his promises. You wanted the Gulf states as the Iranians to stay out of this. And you hit the Gulf states to say to them, anybody who gets involved will be hit. But let's not lie to each other. In order for planes to go and hit Iran, they have to go through Arab airspace. They have to go through Arab bases. In the words of Donald Trump, we're using Saudi bases, and if they wanted to stop us, it's not like they could stop us anyway. Implying that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has asked the Americans not to use Saudi bases. And Trump effectively said to the Saudi Crown Prince, you're not normalizing for me. I already allowed you to take your time normalization. Don't you dare ask me not to use the military bases. The Qataris caught in between the Iranians and the Americans, trying to appease both sides and struggling to do so. I think, in the words of Hamad bin Jasim, the former Qatari Prime Minister, I don't know who's winning here. Because with Trump's escalation, and now that he hits further forward, that's an escalation that it's unclear who's going to blink first and who's going to climb down.
Yeah.
The other point worth making is this. What does success look like? The assumption here is that if there is a peace deal between the Americans and the Iranians, then this is a victory for the region because a peace deal means there is peace in the region. I argue the opposite happens. Once there's a deal, the aggressor goes from being Israel to Iran. So Israel now is forced by the Americans to back off, while the Iranians unlock the Iraqi militias again and unlock the Houthis again, and they unlock Hezbollah again, not against Israel and the Americans, but once more, as they did before, against the region itself. Why? Because if you've beaten the Americans, and if you've won, and if you have, then this is the golden opportunity to reassert yourself once more. So if you're talking victory, are we getting closer to peace and that's a win? I don't think we're getting closer to peace, that's a win. So let's cast that aside as well. What other dynamics exist in order to measure it? Do we measure it from the sense of that there is a new regional order being established? Let's go with this one because it's the one that everybody mentioned. What does this new regional order look like? It looks like the Houthis entrenching themselves in Sana'a after having done a coup in 2014, while Yemenis continue to complain that we don't have the means to oust the Houthis and retake our country back. So the Houthis begin to cement and take more territory in Yemen while they try to establish themselves as the overlord of Yemen, because Abd al-Malik al-Houthi believes it's haram for anyone not from the Ahl al-Bayt to rule Yemen. The militias in Iraq who've been wrestling with the Americans over the next prime minister will believe themselves that now that Iran and the Americans have managed to find a truce, Iran now is much easier for them to appoint the prime minister of Iraq, as it has done so in the past through Haider al-Abadi, Adil Abdul Mahdi, through Noor al-Maliki. When Muqtada al-Sadr and Noor al-Maliki fell apart, it was Iran that ordered Muqtada al-Sadr in the name of Wilayat al-Faqih to go and join Noor al-Maliki and prop up his government, because the risk was if Noor al-Maliki couldn't form a government, then the Sunnis might come back. That was the narrative at the time. So in terms of regional order, that regional order is not one in which Iran, as the power now, is maintaining peace in the region. That's Iran in which its proxies are now entrenched, and there's no way that Saudi is going to tolerate it, which is why Saudi appears to have bombed the Sana'a airport on the basis that if Trump is going to hit the Iranians and Trump is not going to relent, he's going to continue doing so, then let's see if we can weaken the Houthis, and maybe we can force the Houthis to come to a deal in Yemen that ends the war that is taking place, that took place after the Houthis allied with the dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh in order to take power. My point is, this new regional order is intolerable for the Gulf states. So that's simply another, powder keg that will lead to war as well. So going back to your question, who's winning?
Yeah.
It's clear that the region is not winning. The Israelis go for the fourth scenario. The Israelis are really upset that the Americans forced them into peace with the Iranians. So the Israelis, through Somaliland, they invite the Somaliland president and tell him, listen, now you're a pariah with the whole Muslim world. It's like the Voldemort meme, like you put your faith in me. You now put your faith in me. So now Somaliland says, what do we need to do? Because we're a pariah now by everybody. Israel says, I want a military base. Now look at where that military base is positioned, Jalal. I don't know if you get your editors, they'll put a map on it. You see that it's on the Bab al-Mandab. You know the Bab al-Mandab that Iran could leverage that would cause catastrophic in the economy? The Israelis are saying, listen guys, don't turn away from me because Iran bullied you. I'm going to put a base on the Bab al-Mandab alongside the UAE. So if the Houthis ever try to shut it, we have the means through Somaliland in order to go and hit the Houthis, in order to clear that area should the Houthis ever decide to do so. Meaning the Israelis and the Emiratis are establishing military bases in preparation not for peace, in preparation for a bigger war, in preparation for a re-encounter with Iran, in a preparation for a new fight with Iran. And if Trump had to buckle because of the leverage points, let's now redraw the region where we can prevent those leverage points from squeezing Trump again. My point is, look at how everybody is moving in the region. They're not moving on the basis that peace is coming. They're moving on the basis that war is coming. There's an extraordinary Saudi analyst I always encourage people to read, Hisham bin Abdulaziz al-Ghannan, who tweeted before the MOU that even if there is peace, the current status quo is untenable for everybody in the region. It can't survive like this, meaning that a peace that doesn't address that untenable status quo will only mean it will be a pause before a war happens again. And sure enough, he was right. A war ended up happening again. And this is why I argue that, what are your metrics for success here? Because currently, the way I see it is, Trump in hysteria is bombing the Iranians. The Iranians are refusing to back down and they're escalating as well. The Israelis are happy with the escalation. The Gulf states are worried about that escalation, and everybody now is arming themselves and preparing for war. I think this will be a Royal Rumble. This will be like, somebody said to me the other day as a joke, he goes, Sami, it feels like Super Smash Bros. Like where everybody's just fighting in a royal. And this is genuinely what it feels like. Because for Donald Trump, and this is the point I finish on, it's important to understand how Donald Trump feels at this time if you want to understand why the Americans are hitting the Iranians. What Iran is asking for Donald Trump is surrender. And Trump knows it's surrender. And if you think about it, if Trump makes those deals, who are the loudest who will shout to the American public that this was a surrender? It won't be the Iranians, it will be the Israelis. They'll say, you see, because you didn't go in all out with us, now look, you've surrendered. And they'll shout, and chances are they'll go put their weight behind Marco Rubio, and they'll try to get Marco Rubio and tell Marco Rubio, please, you go and finish off what Donald Trump wouldn't.
So on the Saudi Houthi escalation, to just explain that again. So there was a 4-year informal truce between the two sides. That's been broken, and it was broken after the Saudi airport strike on the Sana'a airport. Why did the Saudis strike Sana'a airport? What was the idea behind that?
It's unclear if the Saudis are the ones who hit it or if the Americans are the ones who hit the Houthis via Saudi Arabia. The reason why I say this is that the Houthis' response by firing a couple of missiles at Saudi Arabia seems to have been a warning to Saudi Arabia that do not get involved in this. Like, stay out of it. We know you're allowing planes to take off from Saudi Arabia, but we're willing to tolerate that because we recognize you don't actually have the power to prevent that. But don't actively get involved. Don't let them hit us like through those bases. And it appears, as it stands, there hasn't been a future exchange of those missiles here and there.
Right.
The Saudis, I think the dilemma that they have at the moment is, I'm going to word this strictly politically, put morality out of the window for a second, is that this is actually a golden opportunity for the Saudis to rally their allies in Yemen for a campaign to retake Sana'a from the Houthis. This is the perfect time to gather the Islah, the Nasirists, the other political parties in Yemen who make up the government, to gather them all under one banner, make them go to Hudaydah on the port to cut off the Houthis' supplies that they get, and then from Hudaydah march on Sana'a. Now, the last time they did it, in 2018 or 2019 in Hudaydah, the Americans stepped in to rescue the Houthis and the UN stepped in to rescue the Houthis. For their own reasons, that needs a different podcast, and maybe you'll bring someone else to participate in that. So the Saudis, the UAE, after Hudaydah, UAE were like, well, it's clear the international community won't let us retake, Sana'a. This was maybe 2017 actually, because it was the Democrats in power, and the Democrats were more amenable to a deal, and part of their deal with the Iranians was allowing the Iranian proxies to entrench themselves and turning a blind eye to the coup that took place in Yemen. The Saudis could rally their allies, but the problem the Saudis have is they are deeply concerned that Islah, who they claim to be associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. The reason why I say they claim is because, unlike other Muslim Brotherhood members, Islah actually ruled Yemen for a while. They are worried that the Islah come to power, that Islah will be more independent, that Saudi is likely to accept. And therefore the Saudis can't decide who's worse, Islah or the Houthis. And that paralysis, by the way, is what has allowed the Houthis to thrive in Yemen. It's not Iran. It's the Saudi paralysis in terms of who do we want to rule Yemen, and their inability to allow any party to really go towards Sana'a. Saudi does have the option, and this is why the Houthis fired the missile. It does have the option to rally those in Hadramaut, to rally those in Ta'iz, to rally those in Aden, to make a campaign north. And I think they could oust the Houthis from Sana'a. The reason why I say this is that the attack on the airport implies that there is a concern that the Houthis could be activated by the Iranians. I think at this moment in time, the Iranians have said, don't activate yet because I don't want to push Trump too hard. But the Houthis now will be saying to themselves, but if I don't do anything right now, like, I could be in serious trouble here in Yemen. Whether the Saudi Crown Prince chooses to do so is a different question, primarily because there may be a concern that if he marches on the Houthi, and here is the irony, when people say that UAE is against Iran, that if the Saudis get the Yemenis to march against the Houthis and to retake the capital and re-establish the internationally recognized government, the UAE may hit Saudi Arabia from behind, using the Southern Transitional Council, the Southern separatists, to hit that same army from behind, wedging the Saudis' allies between the Houthis and between the Southern separatists, which is why perhaps maybe those in Riyadh are questioning or being deeply concerned. But the point I will say is this. For Riyadh, Yemen is the thorn that Iran keeps prodding. The Saudis need Yemen to be liberated from the Houthis. I'm not saying this because I'm implying bin Salman is a good man, but rather the Yemenis, I always used to say that the hardest questions I used to get in Q&A sessions when I'd give talks in America or Australia was that the talk would finish and then Yemenis would approach me, and Syrians. Yemenis would come to me, and Syrians. And I remember Yemen, I was in Memphis, and a group of Yemeni brothers and sisters, they came to me. They said to me, Sami, can we ask you a question privately? I said, yes. They said, how do we reconcile the Ummah celebrating the butchers of our families in Yemen? Is it a weakness of faith on our part that we want to take our country back and our homes back from those who did a coup and took it from us violently and militarily? In other words, we should support those who slaughtered us. Or is it just the Ummah doesn't understand enough about Yemen or doesn't understand enough about Syria? And I said to them, to be honest, the Ummah doesn't know much about the stories that take place in the region. Which is fine, I get it. We're raised on Spider-Man and Hollywood and Batman and these things as well. But the reason I make this point is, The Saudi campaign in Yemen, Iran is not the only threat that it's facing, it's also the UAE as well. Because if you control Yemen, think about that access that you have on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Think about an independent Yemen that refuses to be dragged with the Saudis or the Iranians or the Americans or the Israelis. Think about it, that independent Yemen on the Bab el-Mandeb becomes the most powerful power on that strait, more powerful than Eritrea, more powerful than Somaliland, more powerful than the Americans. And if it's independent, imagine what it does for the leverage for all, which is why I'm an advocate of Yemen's liberation, because while the Houthis may be firing missiles at the Israelis, the paralysis that they've caused in Yemen as a result of going to war with the Yemeni population because of their ideological belief that only Ahl al-Bayt could rule has paralyzed Yemen, and that's why Yemen is a playground for all these various different interests. Whether the Saudis choose to launch that campaign, I always say that while the Saudi Crown Prince has many opportunities, I don't know yet if he's ever been able to capitalize on them in a way that actually benefits Saudi Arabia. When he went against the UAE, the Turks and the Qataris hesitated. And the reason they hesitated is because they believe that the Saudi has an opportunity. They believe Saudi has the resources. They don't believe the Saudi Crown Prince has the wisdom to be able to deploy it.
Interesting. Let's move on to American public opinion. Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff for Barack Obama, very much in the Zionist camp, of course, from a Jewish sort of background. Rahm Emanuel is standing to be, I think he's mayor of Chicago, and he went to Tel Aviv and he gave this pretty extraordinary presentation to those in the audience, saying that America and Israel have had this cozy established relationship and now they need to separate. He went as far as to say that the Americans should put conditionality to the weapons that it sells to Israel, and that potentially the Americans should sanction Israel for some of its excesses. And he cited the excesses in the region, but as well as in the West Bank. He said to the Israelis that they need to start paying for their own defenses and not rely on America. And he said that the Americans should put sanctions on violent settlers in the West Bank. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary for a very pro-Israeli politician. We know his time during Obama's administration and how pro-Israel Obama was. But he cites the fact that American public opinion has shifted. And in that speech, he talks about how under the age of 30, you cannot find now a sizable opinion in America that is pro-Israel. In fact, you find it to be pro-Palestinian. And above 30, it's moved in a very, very different direction to what it was before this genocide began. So I suppose my question is for you to comment on, the speech of Rahm Emanuel and what he's trying to do, and whether there's a political motive there, whether there's a shift in the Democratic Party, whether he exemplifies that shift in a Democrat. I mean, he's not a Mamdani Democrat, but nevertheless, maybe he's seen the writing on the wall for the Democrats and what that tells us about public opinion.
I think that, first of all, it's important to put into context that Rahm Emanuel wants to be president. He wants to run as the Democrat candidate. And therefore, I think that the speech is extraordinary in that it reflects an admission that public opinion has shifted so much that the Democrats are now being forced to reckon with it. And the reason why, think about this context. Chuck Schumer is refusing to reckon with it. Hakeem Jeffries is refusing to reckon with it. Cory Booker is refusing to reckon with it. And they are proactively trying to undermine their own candidates. Whether it's Abdul Sayed, they try to undermine Mamdani. They're trying to save the Israeli position by any cost, even if it means undermining their own party base that's clearly voting for anti-AIPAC candidates. I think Rahm Emanuel is looking at Chuck Schumer and saying that if he continues not to shift his position, then the whole Democrat Party is doomed. Huh. So I'm going to go and I'm going to be the middleman between them. I'm going to acknowledge to the base that yes, it is true that Israel has become a pariah. And I'm going to go and I'm going to admit very bravely as Rahm Israel Emanuel. Yeah. I'm going to go and say that truly it's become a problem. But what I'm not going to say is that the future requires a Palestinian solution. You'll notice in his speech, he blamed the Palestinians for not taking those peace agreements. So essentially trying to say that before I allow the goalpost to move too far, let me stop the goalpost where I can. I can't bring it back to what it was before. This undying support won't exist anymore. But I can bring it about here where we acknowledge that Israel public opinion has changed. We can give some sort of concessions whereby you sanction settlers in areas that we haven't conquered yet, not in the areas that have been conquered by the Israelis. And therefore, this will be this middleway position. Israel will acknowledge what it did was wrong. It will make some cheap concessions to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians will say thank you, and the Democrat base will not turn against Israel at the speed with which it's turning against Israel today. Having said that, because I think that's what Ram is after.
Yeah.
The fact that Ram acknowledges it and is ready to say it in Tel Aviv and ready to risk the backlash of the very Israelis that he loves and supports demonstrates that he believes that Israel is truly in an existential crisis. He's saying to them, guys, you don't understand. I know you don't like what I'm about to say. And I know that these things shouldn't be said out loud. But I have to say them out loud because I don't think you understand. If you continue the way you are, Israel is done for. If you continue the way you are, believe me, in our lifetimes, America won't support Israel anymore. And without America, we're doomed. The point of Ram's speech is an extraordinary nature by which he's basically almost pleading with the Israelis, telling them, I swear to you, don't know how bad it is. This is an existential crisis in every meaning of the word. Give me the baton, give me room to be able to criticize you. I promise to go back to the Democrat base and I promise to bring them back to you, but you have to give me something here. You can't be so absolutist in the way that you've been so before. That's extraordinary when you consider how Israel reacts to those who criticize its policies, how they pull the rug from under candidates who run in America, how they turn on Trump when he does a deal and start talking about promoting Marco Rubio and the like, how they punish Thomas Massie by spending $30 million in order to topple him, how they topple Jamal Bowman for suggesting a ceasefire and he loses with Ford in a $14 million race, how they punished Cory Bush. Israelis don't tolerate even the suggestion that maybe there should be a ceasefire. So for Ram to go to them and say to them, guys, really, you're losing America. The fact that he's willing to risk their wrath, knowing full well that if he wants to become mayor of Chicago, he needs AIPAC on board. If he wants to become president, he needs AIPAC on board. That demonstrates to Ram just how existential he believes that threat to be in. Because Ram can see what's happening in the US. He can see that Maxine Dexter is taking money from AIPAC, going to Congress and calling what happened in Gaza a Holocaust. She apologizes later, but then goes and votes with Rashida Tlaib's bill to call what happened in Gaza a genocide. Ram can see that Chris Menefee wins on an AIPAC platform. AIPAC congratulate his victory, but when he goes to Congress, he votes for the Block the Bombs Act, the blocking weapons going to Israel. He can see that Adam Hamawi in New Jersey wins against AIPAC candidates as an anti-AIPAC candidate. He sees that Malinowski, who all Malinowski said was, I will consider conditioning aid. Like, it was such a mild statement. I will consider conditioning aid. And AIPAC launched a candidate against him, and Anna Lilia Mechia ended up winning in that seat instead. Mamdani now is more popular with young Jews than Netanyahu is. And I think when Ram is looking at this, Ram is saying to himself, listen, America is shifting so much that politically, I need to now give something to the Democrat base that implies I'm criticizing the Israelis. I haven't turned completely, which is why he went to Tel Aviv. I haven't turned completely, which is why he's warning them. I'm not going to ban AIPAC, even though it's a foreign agent. But I need you guys to give me something. I need you to stop what you're doing in Gaza. I need you to stop, I need you to pause it. This is why I think Ram is asking them. I need you to pause it because now's not the time, because too many people can see it on TikTok. Too many people can see it on Instagram. Too many people can see it on social media. Guys, you need to be more PR savvy if you're going to do what we all want you to do and dream of you doing. But for now, I need to tell you bluntly, you're losing America. You need to pause. The final point I'll say here is this. Why is Ram doing that? He's doing that because public opinion has shifted so much, but it shifted why? It shifted because ordinary Americans don't stop talking about the issue. And I know that somebody said to me, Sami, like every time you talk, that's all you seem to say. The reason why it's all I seem to say is because even I am stunned at how powerful this concept is, that because everybody continues to talk about it, it continues to be such an important issue that even 3 years after the genocide, when it should have died, the reality is that it is still affecting people's electoral choices. It's still affecting the way people make decisions. Jalal, me and you are coming from the UK. Keir Starmer has 117 majority in parliament. He got smashed in the council elections, not just because of the rise of reform, but because people still angry with him over the genocide, chose to vote either for independence or the Green Party, and he lost those council seats. He lost Hackney, he lost Lambeth, he lost all of these different places, and now he's been toppled by his own party, who are not confident that their 117 majority is enough. They believe if Starmer continues, not only would they lose the majority, they'll lose the parliament itself. That's extraordinary when you consider what is the catalyst for that power? What's the catalyst for that change? The catalyst for that change is not only that people are speaking out, but that they keep doing it. It's the consistency of the message. That's why Allah says, فَذَكِرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَ. Remember, for remembrance benefits you. That's why Allah says, وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُ. That the act that's done consistently, Allah amplifies it. The more we're talking about it, the more impact it's having. In the Aram ends up going to Tel Aviv in order to tell the Israelis they're in an existential crisis. It's not because people spoke out in 2023. It's not because people spoke out in 2024. It's not because people spoke out in 2025. It's because it's 2026 now and they're still speaking out. That consistency is leading to that continued amplification of the voice, whereby now you're seeing that those who are at odds between Harris and Trump are now coming together because they're recognizing how much that voice is shifting dramatically. And that's what I thought was the most extraordinary thing in Ram's speech.
Yeah.
Ram wasn't saying this is a conspiracy from Erdogan in Turkey. He wasn't saying this is a conspiracy from Emir Tamim of Qatar or bin Salman of Saudi or bin Zayed of UAE, or he would never conspire against Israel. But it wasn't a conspiracy from any of these leaders. He said, guys, you don't understand. What was in your question? Under 30s have turned on you so much, meaning the future of America is no longer with Israel. The future of America is no longer with you. You need to change. He's not saying Palestine needs to change. You need to change quickly. Otherwise, we're all screwed. And I think that's a tremendous testament to the power of the ordinary people who moved, boycotted, protested, and spoke. And I think it's every encouragement to keep doing what it is. I'll finish with the American saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working, don't ask for alternatives. Just keep doing what you're doing because it's working.
Great. JD Vance, also, after we spoke the last time, just after it, we saw JD Vance go on Joe Rogan, and he spoke very openly about the influence of the Israeli lobby in America. He also gave a speech where he said that Israel should stop attacking its only ally in the world, its only ally that it has left in the world. There obviously is a shift in America, and there's a shift in the Republican Party. For JD Vance to say that, just give us your view on that. Like, why is it that Vance and others within the Republican establishment have now somewhat turned on the Israelis?
There is an Arabic saying, it's حَقٌ أُرِدَ بِهِ بَاطِل. It's when you say something that is correct, but for the wrong reason. First, let's start with the broader trend, which is that the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens have shifted, which implies there is a shift in language within the Republican Party itself.
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson openly praised JD Vance, saying that he likes him. It does appear that maybe they are from the similar strand, by which JD Vance truly believes not in the Palestinians, but in America first, and therefore Israel is violating what's happening in America, and therefore the Israelis need to be contained. It's not necessarily because of the Gaza genocide, it's about the disproportionate influence that Israel has. On the personal front, however, there is something worth noting, which is that if you notice that JD Vance was relatively quiet when this war against Iran began, even though, according to Marco Rubio, they all knew that it was done at the request of the Israelis. The next presidency of the United States, or the next Republican candidate, will most likely at this moment in time be between JD Vance or Marco Rubio. JD Vance hesitated in this war against Iran, in my opinion, because he was unsure how the base would react. AIPAC is weakened, but are they still strong enough to get the majority of Republicans to support the war against Iran? Or are Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens influential enough that the Republican Party have turned against the Israelis? Because of the lack of clarity over that, JD Vance chose a wait-and-see policy. When he saw that everybody was turning against the Iran war, he leaked that he had been against the war in the first place in the meeting to try to tell the Republican base, I'm not associated with Trump's betrayal in that he joined the Israelis against the war with Iran after promising not to go to war. Rubio did something completely different, which is, I'm supporting the Israelis wholeheartedly. And I support them so much that because they're upset with the negotiations in Islamabad, even though I'm the Secretary of State, I'm not going to Islamabad. Because it's my job as the foreign minister to go and do so, but I'm not willing to do so because I don't want to upset the Israelis. Why? Because they are my ticket to become the president in the next presidential election. The Israelis were so happy with Marco Rubio that the polling amongst AIPAC supporting Republicans is that Rubio is by far the preferred candidate to run in the presidency. Meaning, who's Miriam Adelson and these others more likely to back? JD Vance or Marco Rubio? They're more likely to back Marco Rubio. JD Vance wants to be president. The traditional way in America to become president is you need to pay homage to AIPAC and to the Israeli lobby so that they give you the money and support in order to become president. JD Vance now, that's out of the question for him because he did the hesitation. AIPAC didn't forgive Jamal Bowman for hesitating. They didn't forgive Thomas Mack. Thomas Mack didn't hesitate, but they didn't forgive Jamal Bowman for hesitating. They're not going to forgive JD Vance. Rubio didn't hesitate. We're going to support Rubio. So JD Vance can't access Miriam Adelson's millions of dollars in order to win the presidency. He needs a source somewhere. So if that's out of the way and I can't win by being pro-AIPAC anymore because they hate me, I need to roll the dice. And I think he's rolling the dice now. Even though he's a Christian, I think gambling is haram in Catholicism, which is what Muslims agree with as well, because Muslims and Christians actually believe in more shared beliefs than they do with Zionists, but that's a different issue. JD Vance is rolling the dice and saying, can Tuckers and Candace become so influential that the entire Republican Party shifts? And the same thing we've seen in Democrats where anti-AIPAC candidates are winning. I can win as the America First anti-AIPAC. And you notice Trump is not saying it because even Trump is unsure where his base lies. He's allowing JD Vance to say it. And I think the fact that he's allowing JD Vance to make statements that sound like Trump would usually be eager to make because it causes headlines, the fact he's sending JD Vance is because Trump himself is looking and saying, does my base still love Israel the way they did before? Because if they don't, maybe I've got greater room to maneuver here against the Israelis. JD Vance, I think, is testing the waters because he has no choice but to test them anymore. Do or die now. I can't hold the stick from the middle. I'm being punished. And that's why I think he's coming out with these statements. And the fact he's getting a positive reaction to it, the fact that people are reacting very positive, will only encourage him to do so. And that's why I argue that in these midterm elections, it's America first versus Israel first. And in the next presidential election, it will be America first versus Israel first. In these midterm elections, it's America first versus Israel first. Why? Because somebody might be saying Democrats are going to win and Republicans are going to get smashed. Even if Democrats win, it's still America first versus Israel first. Because the candidates that might win are not the candidates that Israel First Chuck Schumer wants to win. They are the America First candidates who are like Mamdani who will win. Chuck Schumer hates Mamdani. If a Congress comes, Chuck Schumer, if Democrats win the House, Chuck Schumer will still be furious if they are not the Democrats that he wants. I would even go far as to say that he would prefer an Israel First Republican Congress to an America First Democrat Congress. That's how much Chuck Schumer is loyal to AIPAC and the Israeli lobby. That's how far it is. And the proof is that he was ready, him and Trump together, backed Cuomo against Mamdani. Even though the base chose Mamdani, Chuck Schumer joined Trump against his own party for the sake of Israel. Cory Booker joined Trump against Mamdani for the sake of Israel. They went to war with the Democrat Party, suggesting we'd rather have a Republican Israel first than a Democrat America first. Like that's how the lines had been drawn. So in these midterm elections, if Abdul Said wins in Michigan, Chuck Schumer will say, I wish the Republican had won. If Adam Hamawi wins in New Jersey, he will say, I wish the Republican had won. If Ananilia Mejia wins, or Maxine Dexter, or Chris Menefee, or Chris Rabb win the Congress race, Chuck Schumer will say, I wish the Republicans had won instead. These are not the Democrats that I want because they don't support Israel in the way that I support Israel. And that's what we're seeing happen now. We've been talking about in the Democrat Party. JD Vance and Rubio is the example in the Republican Party. Rubio's gone all in with AIPAC and the Israel lobby. JD Vance is saying, because they violated me so much and I have no hope with them, let me try the America first. And I think the Americans now would have a choice in the next election. This may be the last time and the last government that Israel is ever able to convince to do its bidding.
Britain. Andy Burnham has today taken over as leader of the Labour Party and effectively will become the Prime Minister, or has become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's a quirk of the British Constitution how that happens, but he effectively is now in charge of the UK. He gave an online speech or an online message where he said that the Labour Party acted too slow over Gaza, and he regretted that, and he felt that what had happened in Palestine, he didn't use the word genocide, he didn't use anything as extreme as that, as so-called extreme as that. But he did say that it was a humanitarian disaster, whatever the phrase he used. So there's been a little bit of a shift. I mean, everyone has pointed out the hypocrisy of his presentation and why he hasn't gone far enough. But there is a shift there. What do you make of that shift of political opinion within the Labour Party? 2 years after the general election, where the Labour Party doubled down, despite the resignation of numerous politicians within the party, doubled down on its support for Israel. I mean, Keir Starmer was an arch Zionist without doubt.
I think there's two things to know. First and foremost, Keir Starmer is toppled because even 117-seat majority does not mean that people necessarily like you. And we saw in the last election that seats that had 28,000 Labour majority, Labour held on to it with about 500. Ilford North, it was, I don't know, maybe 15, 16,000, wherever it was. It ended up, West Streeting held it on by about 500 votes or 700, however many votes it was, less than 1,000. Implying that Labour didn't win the election, the Conservatives collapsed and lost the election. Those are two very distinct, different dynamics. Keir Starmer believed he had won the election and tried to act accordingly, and realized in the council elections just how much the people really voted for him on the basis that they didn't actually like him. As a result, he's been removed, and Labour Party believe that they're in an existential crisis. We need to replace him with Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham is looking at the room and saying that I know I'm not safe with a 117-seat majority. And I know that we lost a lot of votes in areas that had to do with Gaza. But I'm also not convinced that Gaza is an issue that resonates in all of the constituencies. They resonate in some key ones here. Therefore, I shouldn't go all the way. I should go some of the way in order to acknowledge to these constituencies and say to them, Keir Starmer ignored you, I won't ignore you. And therefore, we got our response wrong. Meaning, Andy Burnham recognizes that one of the reasons Keir Starmer has been toppled is because of Gaza, because of the disgust amongst the electorate over the support that Labour had for the genocide. But he's also not convinced that that is necessarily a deal breaker, because the Zionists still have significant influence, whether it's through media, whether it's through the press and the like. And Andy Burnham is yet to determine who is more powerful between the two who are campaigning. Yes, there are Palestine protests, but equally there is enough lobbying to call Palestine Action a terrorist group. Yes, there are boycotting efforts and there are impacts at the local council elections. But those council elections, they don't demonstrate that those votes are going to one group. They're being in different groups, independents, Greens, all these other, etc. And therefore, even if I lose some of them, it won't become a coordinated effort. And the best that an independent movement got in the last election was 5 independent MPs, which demonstrates that this isn't something that is a huge momentum that requires me to say the word genocide. All this requires me to do is acknowledge that it is a problem, because if I got 32%, and Corbyn got 40%, that's an 8% difference. If I say that we got it wrong, I'll get 3% back. If I say genocide, I'll probably get 3% back. There's no point alienating a 5% who might leave me if I say the word genocide. That's what I think Andy Burnham's calculation is. Reform were polling very high, and they were winning in Makersfield, or they won in Makerfield. And then Burnham ran and defeated Reform, demonstrating that Reform is a protest vote, not a serious vote. And now Nigel Farage is now in trouble with that £5 million bung that he took. And now he's trying to do this flex in Clacton, where he wants to resign and say the people are with me, and no party is willing to run with him. But it's clear that Reform are in crisis, which will encourage Andy Burnham by saying that in the next election, Labour are the ones who are being seen as the only force that can stop Reform from coming in. My view is, it is true that Labour is the only force that can stop Reform from coming in. But what I think will be interesting in the next 2 years is what candidates Labour put forward in the elections, given the damage and hit they took in the last election over the genocide in Gaza. Will they put West Streeting in Ilford North again? Or will they say, West Streeting, we need to move you somewhere else because you're a pariah in Ilford North and we can't guarantee that you'll win, and therefore we need to put another Labour candidate, somebody who perhaps has said that yes, it was a genocide. Andy Burnham won't say it, but I'll let that MP candidate say it over there, because that's what's going to let me win over there. And here is where there is a suggestion or a potential scenario could take place in the UK that's similar to the US. In the US, the Democrats are most likely going to come to power in the same way that Labour most likely will come to power in the next election. The mobilization in the US is not to create a new party, and it's not to go Green Party. The mobilization in the US is that if Chuck Schumer wants pro-Israel candidates, We have a mechanism to ensure that pro-Israel candidates lose the primaries and Chuck Schumer has no choice but to accept them. So if Adam Hamawi wins in the congressional race, Chuck Schumer can't say, I don't want Adam Hamawi. He has to shake Adam Hamawi's hand and tell him, welcome to Congress. There is a mechanism in the Labour Party that is similar to those Democrat primaries, whereby the local Labour Party can call either for a change in MP or they have to approve the candidate who's going to run for the MP first. Meaning, usually how it works, because local Labour parties aren't very interested often in who the candidate should be, the main office says we want this person to be MP and the local Labour party say, sure, no problem. But there is a possibility in the next year and a half where local Labour parties, in the Democrat case in the US, many Muslims after the elections, they joined the Labour Party to be part of the reflection process. Many anti-genociders like non-Muslims joined the Democrat Party to be part of the reflection process. There is a possibility in the next 2 years with this Andy Burnham wave that those who abandon Labour or cancel their memberships go back and take their memberships within the Labour Party because Keir Starmer, who had purged them before, now he's not there to purge them. They're able to go back to the Labour Party, which they're there. When they're there, they are part of that reflection process. They're part of Andy Burnham's deliberations over where the party should go. It's clear it didn't work under Starmer. Which way should I go? These members who joined the Labour Party, and indeed many of the Labour Party already do so, will say, Mr. Burnham, you didn't go far enough. This is a genocide. If you want to win Ilford North, you're going to have to say it. If you want to win in Birmingham, you're going to have to say it. If you want to win in Manchester, you're going to have to say it. These are serious seats. Andy Burnham hearing that, the fact that he made that statement means there's already pressure that he's seeing. It means he's identified this as a problem. What he hasn't determined is how much of a problem it is, and that's why there is a potential scenario where people sign back to the Labour Party, join their reflection process, and in their local wards, when they're deciding who should be the MP for the area, they turn around and say, our criteria is very simple. Does that person believe it's a genocide or not? No. Then we move for a motion because we want the Labour Party to win. We move for a motion to flip that candidate. In other words, there could be the same way there is a primary movement in the US, there is a primary movement in the UK. There are areas that will not vote for the main party. For example, I think, Adnan Hussain, for example, in Blackburn, that's an independent MP who's very rooted in his community. Like that's an independent movement that will probably stay. Shaukat Adam in Leicester, for example, probably stay, very rooted in his community. They're not going back to any party. There may even be a couple more independent candidates who move forward. But I think what we're realizing, especially with the Green Party's not as high showing as people had expected, is that the Green Party are Labour members who were really upset at the trajectory Keir Starmer went, and there is a possibility in these next 2 years for them to go back to that reflection process. Whether they succeed or not is very different, but it will be interesting to see which MPs Andy Burnham puts forward, because he may never come out and say it's a genocide, but he may implicitly recognizing it by where Chuck Schumer is campaigning against Mamdani. Andy Burnham, instead of resisting Mamdani, he says, let the Mamdani go, because this is, at least in this way, I see the Labour shift move. And I think the Israelis, that is what they're deeply concerned about. I don't think Israel is concerned that Andy Burnham will lose the election. They are concerned that there will be enough pressure within the Labour Party, the same way there's pressure in the Democrat Party, that Andy Burnham will say something the Israelis don't want him to say. The question, I think, for every Brit who loves the country, and I'm blunt, like I tell people, like I like the land I live in, I love the United Kingdom, I love the freedom it affords me, I love the rule of law, which is why sometimes when people here talk about hijrah, I tell them I ain't leaving the United Kingdom. I'm a proud British citizen, I condemn what is wrong and I applaud what is right. As a British citizen who believes that we are ambassadors of justice and righteousness as Muslims, I believe that we should participate in this duty in the next 2 years to push Andy Burnham's reflections and say to him, Starmer didn't just lose because of the economy. He lost because he couldn't say the word genocide. As the Mehdi Hassan said in his interview in LBC, he needs to say it. If Andy Burnham says it, I think that's a tremendous shift in the Labour Party. And they may well win back many of those that they lost initially. And the reason I think that door should be open, before anybody says, the door should be slammed shut. The reason that the Democrat base is voting for candidates who are anti-APEC is because by doing so, you have that. Look at Jamal Bowman, for example. He's a very good example. Jamal Bowman voted for the Iron Dome, and then when he realized the tide was shifting, said, I'm going to call for a ceasefire. Because the door was left open for Jamal Bowman to welcome his shift in views, he's now endorsing every anti-APEC candidate. He's going across the country, supporting and rallying behind it. And that's a welcome thing. It is possible, I won't say redemption, like that's not what I'm talking about. I think the war criminals should be tried. Keir Starmer needs to stand in The Hague. So does David Lammy, and so does it. David Lammy may even lose his seat in Tottenham as a result of his support for genocide. But I do think in the UK, in the next 2 years, the same way that America will stop supporting the Israelis, I think in our lifetimes, Britain may finally break with the Israelis, not because they want to, but because Andy Burnham, who will move according to the wind, will see that it's untenable to win an election or to rule in government without saying the word genocide.
Okay, one final question, Sami. Are you happy, Sami?
I think happiness is the wrong word to use. I'm content. And I'll tell you what I mean. I am content with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me. I'm content with the way that He's ruling the world. I'm sad when I see the genocide. I'm sad when I see Sudan. I'm sad when I see the Rohingya. I'm sad when I see that we have to fight for basic rights. I'm sad when I see that a young kid is dragged for some posts, that maybe he should have done in Australia, but that with a bit of guidance and with a bit of support, he can come back to a better way. But instead, the Australian authorities simply want to grab him and want to try him because they want to make a show of him. I'm sad that in America, we still have to tell people that genocide is wrong and that apartheid is wrong. I'm sad that Ramaphosa in South Africa, instead of standing firm and rallying his community behind him, he decides to go and persecute immigrants instead and to go to persecute other smaller communities because he'd rather be a lion against them, and instead he buries his head in the sand against the Americans themselves. I'm sad that when we gather, that sometimes we have to wrestle between one another in terms of which order somebody speaks because you might offend somebody else, which order you have to see organizations because they might be offended. I'm sad that perhaps we have to think too much about this political navigation in terms of how we go. I'm sad that instead of having power to punish those who did wrong, we have to navigate a system by which we try to create an environment where justice can emerge, by which we say to Andy Burnham, I know you can't say genocide, but we will pressure you to say genocide even further, and we'll leave the door open to you. I'm sad that when we look at what's happening in Palestine, that the Muslim leaders continue to refuse to support the Palestinians, and many of them are still closer to the Israelis than they are to the Palestinians. I'm sad that the Ummah can find it within itself to rehabilitate those who slaughtered their own people, like the Houthis and like those militias that were backed by the Iranians, that slaughtered ordinary Muslims in the name of some ideology and some grudge that happened 1400 years ago. I'm sad that we are unable to appreciate the nuance, that in reality, I still see the bloodshed and hear the cries of those families who were slaughtered. I'm sad that we can't find some way to establish that kind of justice as well, while simultaneously upholding that we stand with Palestine too. I am sad that when we tell stories of the Ummah that we're supposed to know already and grow up with, we don't know those stories, not because those books don't exist. We never bothered to learn them, we never bothered to read them, we never bothered to seek them out. I am sad that those in Banja Luka, when they rebuilt the 18 masajid, they had to do it themselves because the Ummah said Bosnia is a small country. I'd rather go to a country with 90 million people like Turkey or Iran or these places, or go to America 360 million, because that's where power is. Bosnia is only 3 million. Who cares about that kind of population? I'm sad that when I see Bosnian families try to create Muslim economies in Zvornik or these other places to help them go for the right of return, a Muslim tells me, Habibi, I'll go to Turkey for 2 weeks, but Bosnia, I'll go for 3-4 days, Sarajevo and Mostar, and that's it. They don't see a greater purpose. And even when you go and push me, you tell them, guys, go, 3 hours and a half is a bit too much. But when he goes to America, he does that road trip for 8 or 9 hours from San Francisco all the way to LA because he wants to enjoy the Pacific coast, because he thinks it looks so amazing. Whereas he complains of a 3-hour mountain road trip in order to go and see Banja Luka, go see Srebrenica, or to go see Zvornik and these others. I'm sad that sometimes when you sit, you have to understand and appreciate that the result is not in my hands. And here I'm not challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but rather saying that Allahumma, maybe in my lifetime I won't see the result, and I just have to simply keep going. So happy is not the word. But I am content that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not made us helpless, and I'm content that He is in control, and I am relieved that He is in control. I'm relieved that He dictates what happens next. I'm relieved that He knows everything that's happening. I'm relieved that He can flip anything in an instant. I'm relieved that there is death in this world, meaning nobody will live forever, and therefore the status quo will never last. I am relieved that there will be justice Yawm al-Qiyamah, in that those who escape it in this dunya, they will stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm relieved that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the story of Nuh alayhi salam, how he persevered for 900 years and couldn't convince his whole community. So Sami, don't hold yourself to such a standard where you believe that you have to convince people. I'm relieved that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us the story of Yusuf alayhi alayhi salam, because if it's genocide today where Yusuf alayhi salam is thrown in a well, and if it's a Gaza board of peace where he's sold into slavery, and if he's thrown into prison because people get bored of Palestine and he's forgotten in prison, that doesn't mean Palestine will win. Yusuf will come out al-Aziz, Palestine will come out al-Aziz. I'm relieved that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the example of the followers of Musa alayhi salam and the followers of Talut, that Musa's followers refused to move, so Allah left them 40 years humiliated, even though Musa alayhi salam had been their prophet. But the following generation with Talut, when they were given the same choice and they decided to move, even though they moved hesitantly, Ya Talut la taqata lana al-yawma bi Jalut wa junudih, like look at the Jalut and all of his army, and they keep moving. He tells them Allah is with us, and they're like, he told us Allah is, and when you read the surah, you can feel like they're like, Ya Talut, why are we doing this? And Talut decides to test that. Whoever drinks more the water is not from me except if they drink a little bit. And they turn around to him and they say to him, Yani, all of this, and now you want to tell us don't drink water? Wallahi, we're drinking. They go and they drink the water. And Talut, instead of saying, let's go back, he says, Allahumma, you are the only one who can deliver this victory for me. I've moved, Ya Rabbi. Rabbi, I move with what I have. Rabbi, I've decided to mobilize you with what I have. And I don't think what I have is enough. Allahumma, I've moved, my army is smaller and it's ill-disciplined and I don't have the resources. But Rabbi, you gave me a promise and I know you won't falter in that promise. Allahumma, I have no idea how I'm going to beat Jalut. I have no idea how I'm going to beat Goliath. I have no idea how I'm going to enter this land that you say you have promised to me. Allahumma, I have no idea. I want you to know, Ya Rabbi, that tawakkalna alayk. I put my trust in you because you gave me a promise. And waqatala Dawood Jalut. A 16-year-old emerges out of nowhere with a slingshot, throws that slingshot, Jalut is finished, and Talut and Dawood and Sulaiman alayhim salam establish a kingdom of which there's never been anything like it. I am content that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me that story, because through the heartbreak and the sadness, when you wake up every morning and I lay there at night and I say to myself, what other jokes should I include in my speech so they will listen to me 15 minutes longer so I can show them the words of justice at? What kind of story should I tell? I told it wrong, this one didn't land, let me fix it. Arham will sit with me and say to me, you know what I think you should do? You know what I think? I think you should tell the story this way, all right? Or I think you should tell the story this way. Nadeem comes and says, brother, you should tell this story. You know what I think? I think you are focusing on the wrong group of people. They are a waste of your time. Go to these people instead. Guys, tell me, how can I deliver the story better? What can I do to beg you to listen, to say, Ya ibadallah, wallahi, we are not weak. We have the ability to move. Please take it seriously when you write something. Take it seriously when you write a letter to Hamish Falconer. Nick Maynard messaged me and said to me, Hussein Abu Safiya is about to die. The Words of Justice set up an email campaign telling people use it and go and email your local representatives. Hamish Falconer, within 24 hours, the Minister for North Africa and Middle East, tweeted and said, I've heard the message. I'm talking to the Israelis about Hussein Abu Safiya. Now he's in a war with the right-wing press, Hamish Falconer, because they're telling him, why did you raise Hussein Abu Safiya's case? He raised it because he got 500,000 emails in his inbox. Ibadallah, move, do something. And that's why I argue that it's a strange question. Someone asked it to me yesterday, Sami, are you happy? And I thought it's a bit of an insensitive question. Happy about what? Look at the state that everybody is in. But I'm content Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, because I believe that the real happiness is when you go Yawm al-Qiyamah and Allah tells you, udkhuluha bisalam, anta jannah bisalam. That's the day where I will be like, Ya Rabbi, I did enough. Like, that's where I want to be. It's tiring to go around to people and tell them, Ya ibadallah, move towards the book. Move. Why do you contest me over a tweet? How much does it cost you? Why do you contest me over an Instagram post? Why do you contest me over a TikTok post? It costs you 2 minutes, even if it does nothing. Do it in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do you contest me over a Coca-Cola? What does it cost you to have an orange juice or to get something else? What does it cost you that when you go on a holiday, that you go Turkey 10 times a year and you go Malaysia 10 times a year? Go and see Bosnia for once. What does it cost you to take your car and go 3 hours and a half when you're going all the way to see the Game of Thrones set in Dubrovnik? Why do you feel like you have to move the earth to do something that is so simple? Well, Allah said, فَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ. The one who does even atom of good deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it. Ibadallah, I understand the fear. I know you're scared. Somebody other day said to me, they introduced me on stage, the brave and this. I said, who's brave? I'm frightened about what's coming next. I'm describing scenarios where we have a great war. But do you know what gives me peace and comfort and contentment? That Musa alayhi salam felt scared. رَبَّنَا إِنَّنَا نَخَافُ. You know, when I read that, I was like, Musa was scared too. I was happy in that moment. I know it sounds weird. I was happy because I realized the fear in my own heart is not weakness. That Musa alayhi salam can keep moving. Allahumma arsil ma'i Harun, my brother. Ushdud bihi azri wa ashriku fi amri. Sell him with me and engage him with me. There's no harm in taking Nadim with me on the tricks. There's no harm in taking Yusuf with me on the tricks. Let them join me as the companions. That's fine, Sami. I know you're worried about the borders, but take Nadim with you. That's fine, no problem. Even though Allah will protect you at the border. When Musa alayhi salam is now in front of them, whether in Oxford Union or whether in shouting at them on Piers Morgan or whether he's with them on Sky News or the like, it's okay, Sami. Musa alayhi salam was scared as well. فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً مُوسَى. I am content with how this dunya goes because Allah is in control. But I am happy that Allah is in control. I'm happy Allah is my Lord. I'm happy, I'm ecstatic Allah is my Lord. I'm ecstatic that He is so powerful that He will deliver the justice. I can't wait to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't wait for Him to lift His veil. I can't wait for Him to look at me and say to the angels, look at the khalq that I created. The Quran was enough to tell him to move. Other people sat in lobbies and said, what's the point? He never uttered it from his mouth. It's not in his sahifa. The angel never wrote, Sami said, what's the point? The angel never said, why should you do it? The angel never wrote that Sami looked down on the person. Though somebody would say, I have a project, I don't know if it will succeed. That's what he said earlier when we go back to the beginning of the podcast. Why do you sit in the pockets? Habibi, I don't know if I can be a benefit, but use me. Why? Not because I care about the person or the project. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if you strive, if you move, if you mobilize, فَكَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Allah elevates and gives that gratitude in terms of that. I am content with the dunya. I am content with what Allah gave me. I'm content with the situation in terms of what's happening. I'm happy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control because I know that means injustice won't last. I know it means that even if I'm not alive to see it, even if my generation turns out to be the generation of Musa alayhi salam, because Musa alayhi salam, when he told him to move, two pious people around him said, guys, Musa alayhi salam is right if you move. They said, no, we're not moving. Go you and Allah and fight. You and Jalal thinking Muslim. Oh, we're going to put pressure. Oh, the word makes count. Oh, go you and Jalal, you show us. Inna ha huna qa'id. We'll be here sitting down. There were two pious people amongst them. It wasn't just Musa who resisted them. I say to myself, maybe, Ya Rabbi, if my generation is a generation that for 40 years will be condemned to humiliation, make me like the two pious sons next to Musa alayhi salam, where at least I enter Jannah in spite of them. And maybe the next generation, Talut's generation, when I meet them in Jannah, inshallah, they will tell me a wonderful story where once upon a time, we didn't grow up with the stories of Bosnia or Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or the Ummah or the change that took place in America or the change that took place in the UK. Maybe we didn't grow up, but there was a Thinking Muslim podcast that I grew up with where I learned all of those stories and I learned all of those identities. It took Sami 36 years to get the identity. Because of Thinking Muslim, it only took me 14 years. By the time I was 15, I was well versed in Muslim politics, in Muslim history, how to mobilize as a Muslim politically. So Sami at 21 couldn't conquer Constantinople, but I at 21 was able to take back Al-Aqsa. May Allah make us with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Habibi, I'm content and I'm happy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Sami, Jazakallah khair. Sami Hamdi, thank you very much for your time today. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Now you've reached the end of this show, and the fact that you've stayed until the very end tells me that you truly believe in our work. Please consider making a one-off donation or becoming a member by visiting thinkingmuslim.com/membership. Now your contributions give you exclusive behind-the-scenes access and the ability to ask questions to our guests and monthly calls with myself, my team, and our guests like Sami Hamdi. Jazakallah khair and keep us in your du'as.